Welcome to the SBA and WCAS Test Administrator Training. To begin with, there are several roles that you should be familiar with during state testing. The District Assessment Coordinator, or DC, is Wendy Sinclair. Your Building Test Coordinator is a staff member who shares responsibility with your building administrator to coordinate the testing at your school and communicates directly with the district coordinator. The test administrator, or TA, is any staff member or contract employee who proctors an online testing session. Most likely, this would be you if you're watching this. And a monitor. A monitor can be any staff member on hand to assist with monitoring students during test administration. Monitors may skip this training and just review the SBA WCAS Basic Test Security training or video. All staff in testing rooms must be trained and should only be in the room for the purpose of supporting the assessment. No parents, no volunteers, no press, and no untrained staff. Some acronyms that you should know or be familiar with. CAT refers to the Computer Adaptive Test. ELA stands for English Language Arts Subject Test. The PT test is a performance task test. The SBA stands for Smarter Balance Assessment, which there are two subjects, ELA and math. TIDE is the Test Information Distribution Engine, where we begin all test sessions. The WCAP portal stands for Washington Comprehensive Assessment Program Portal and is where you'll find a lot of information about the state tests. WCAS stands for the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science. The TAM is the Test Administrator Manual, and SRS stands for the Smarter Reporting System, where you can see student scores as they begin to populate. Security is important because it ensures the integrity and confidentiality of assessment items, prompts, student responses, and student information. Security of assessments is vital to maintaining the fairness and the validity of the results and is required by state and federal law. Student information is confidential and should be kept secure. Security procedures should be followed for all state assessments. There are several prohibited activities during state testing. Under no circumstances should staff review, discuss, or copy secure test content or student responses. Use secure test content to develop instructional resources, assist with or interpret test content for students, alter student responses in any way, leave secure test content unattended in a non-secure location, and leave students unattended during testing. Any of these behaviors would be considered a test incident and requires reporting to the building test coordinator for action. Security policies and responsibilities. State and local laws and policies specify practices to ensure test security and the standardized and ethical administration of assessments. Students must be monitored throughout testing. Only staff members trained for the state assessments being administered can administer or be in a testing room. Volunteers, media, parents, or students not testing are not allowed in a testing room. Reviewing and disclosing test questions is a violation of state law. The Professional Code of Conduct is codified by the Washington State Legislature in WCAS and RCWs. A complete list of rules and regulations can be found at the web link here. The Office of Professional Practices, or OPP, is charged with enforcement, including discipline of any violation of the Professional Code of Conduct. They can be contacted at the phone number on this page. All physical test materials are considered secure testing materials and must be tracked by the building test coordinator, locked up when not in use, never left unattended, and returned to the district when testing is complete. Any paper that a student uses during testing is considered secure and should be treated as such. This includes scratch paper, handouts, notes written by scribes, or screen prints. These paper materials must be placed into a shred bin after the test session is complete. For students testing over multiple days, label the notes with the student's name, collect, and return to the student during the next test session if applicable. When the student is done, notes should be placed in the shred bin. For whiteboards, follow these same instructions. Test tickets are considered secure test materials. Collect them once students have logged in. Keep them locked up when they are not in use. Place in the shred bin after testing is complete or return to your test coordinator. Check with your school's building test coordinator to confirm how they want these handled. About the SBA and the WCAS. State tests are not limited to the SBA and the WCAS. The following tests take place in our schools every year. The WCAS screener is administered to all grades K through 12 students newly enrolled in a U.S. school and meeting specific criteria to determine if they are eligible for multilingual services. This testing takes place throughout the school year. WCAS is administered to kindergarten students in early fall. The WA-AIM is the alternative to the SBA and WCAS and is administered in the winter to students who qualify in grades 3 through 8, grades 10, and grades 11. The WIDA annual assessment is an assessment taken by all multilingual students, grades K through 12, and they're annually tested in the winter. The Smarter Balance Assessment, or the SBA, is administered to all students, excluding those that will participate in the WA-AIM, in grades 3 through 8 and grade 10 in the spring. And the WCAS, or Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science, is administered to all students, excluding those that will be participating in the WA-AIM, in grades 5, grades 8, and grade 11 in the spring. Each school schedules testing within the state testing window. Check with your building administrator for test dates at your building. This spring, you will be a test administrator for the SBA and the WCAS tests. This slide represents the average time that OSPI has determined most students in the following grade bands will take on the tests. So grade bands 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and grade 10 for the SBA, and grades 5, 8, and 11 will participate in the science tests, or the WCAS. These are estimated times used for planning your building test schedule. Students may take more time or less time. It is an untimed test. All of these subject tests are untimed, and a student can take as long as they need. So plans need to be in place for students that will take longer than the average student. There are a few unique testing rules in the SBA and the WCAS tests. Some tests are segmented. All grade levels of the ELA PT and the grade 6 and up of the Math CAT test are split into segments. One student's page forward at the end of a segment, they will not be able to return to questions in the previous segment. The science test has locking items. Once a student responds to a locked item, and pages forward to the next question, they will not be able to go back and change that response. Locking items are identified by a little red or green lock seen next to the question number. Once students start typing response to a locking item, they must complete it. Pausing a test mid-response is not an option. The student will not be able to return to it if this test is paused. Paging forward. Both the SBA and the WCAS online tests require that students answer all questions on a page before they are allowed to page forward. If a student is uncertain about an answer while testing online, they should give their best guess and then flag that item to review again at the end of the test. The pause rule will affect the ability to revisit a question. Remember the cat pause rule for the CAT and the WCAS tests. The CAT and the WCAS tests have a 20-minute pause rule. This means that if the test is paused for 20 minutes or more, when the student next logs in, they will not be allowed to go back to any previous question. They will start at the first unanswered question. Answered questions include questions that have any character entered. Even a single space or character entered into the text field counts as a response, and they will not be able to return to that question. The state can tell exactly how long a test was paused and will only grant appeals to reopen tests for students who experienced a technical difficulty or an incident that disturbed testing. Students testing online may pause a test at any time and will be able to continue with testing on another day, but it is subject to that 20-minute CAT pause rule. This pause rule does not apply to performance tasks. Restricted supports and accommodations. For the SBA and the WCAS, an embedded calculator in the online test will be available for some test items. Handheld calculators are only allowed as an accommodation for math and only for a very limited number of students if it is designated on their IEP or 504 with the following restrictions. Only grades 6 and up are eligible for a handheld calculator as an accommodation on the Math SBA. Calculators are never allowed for grade 3 through 5 students on the math test. A handheld calculator as an accommodation is restricted to only those test items or sections that specifically allow a calculator use and have the embedded online calculator available. To use this accommodation, a TA or a monitor must be on hand to give the student a calculator for the items that has the embedded online calculator available, and then collect that calculator back for online test items that do not have the embedded calculator. The reason for this is because a handheld calculator is really intended to be used only for those students that cannot access the embedded calculator, meaning that the student cannot interact somehow with the embedded calculator. This is why the handheld calculator is restricted only to those items with the embedded calculator. Dictionaries are only allowed on Part 2 of the SBA ELA PT essay. An online dictionary is provided for the ELA PT essay. Offering a handheld dictionary is optional. ML students may be given a published word-to-word translation dictionary only for the SBA ELA PT essay. The WCAP portal and the TA interface. The WCAP portal is the hub for state testing. This is where you can find all the resources you need for giving the state tests. Once you arrive at the portal, scroll down and select either the Summative Smart or Balanced or WCAS card. Scroll down to the activity you would like to use. Please note the difference between the TA interface and the TA practice interface cards and their locations. Be sure to click on the card that you intend to use. Once you select an application, you will need to use your WCAP password to enter. Each school year, you must reset your password in order to access the TA interface. If you haven't logged into the system yet this year, go to the login screen and click on the Request a New One for This School Year link and follow the instructions. Do not wait until the day of testing to do this. New users have been added to the test system and you should have received an activation email. If you missed that email, click Forgot Your Password to reissue it and then check your email. Returning users click Request a new one for this school year to reset your password if you have not already done so this school year. You may be asked to enter a code that will be emailed to you if you are on a new device or recently cleared your cache. Password resets and security codes all expire within 15 minutes of being emailed, so make a plan to log in before your first test session. Are you new to proctoring the SBA or the WCAS? This training is not designed to provide proctors with a full explanation of state assessments or even administering the assessment. The training is a supplement to the Test Administrator Manual, the TAM, and the TA script that you will receive for the test sessions. In addition to reviewing the TAM and the script, new proctors will find it helpful to complete some of the following activities. Have students participate in a training or practice test. New proctors would greatly benefit from participating in this practice. Training tests provide opportunities for staff to practice test administration in a setting very similar to that of the summative test. Those interested in seeing how to administer a test can take the 30-minute interactive self-paced certification course on the WCAP portal. This training walks you through the teacher and student login process. Starting a test session. To prepare for your first test session, you should have the following things on hand. Test tickets. Check your test tickets against your class list. Are you missing any tickets? If you are, let your building test coordinator know. Ancillary items, such as scratch paper, as specified for the test you will be administering. Include any items for an accommodation or support materials if needed. The TA script, from which you read aloud instructions. This guides you through starting a test session and guides you through the student login process. In order for students to access the SBA or WCAS test, you must set up a test session in the TA interface. First, plug in your computer and disconnect any projector. Open Chrome and navigate to the WCAP portal. It's available in the Edmunds bookmarks. Click the summative SBA or WCAS tile. Scroll down to the TA interface and log in. Don't start the session more than 20 minutes prior to students joining, or students will get an error message. Follow the instructions in your TA script to open the test session. It is critical that you give students the correct assessment. The state required test is the summative test. Use the plus sign to drill down to the specific test type, subject, and grade level you will be giving that session. Write the session ID on the board and make sure students understand which test they are taking. This is very important if you are giving more than one test type at the same time. Be sure to drill down to the correct test. Click on the plus sign to open each test. Continue clicking plus signs until there are no more plus signs to open. Then select the specific test type, subject, grade level, and then click the appropriate checkbox. You may click more than one test to give more than one test type in a same session, but you will have to closely monitor which tests students are trying to begin. Student login instructions begin on page 12 of the SBA script and page 13 of the WCAS script. Students log into your test session using their test ticket and the session ID through the secure browser application on their Chromebooks. Students using Chromebooks should follow these instructions. They must log out of their district account on their Chromebook in order to see the app menu in the lower left corner of their Chromebook. Click the Apps button. Select the Secure Test Browser app. Students should see the OSPI logo at the top left corner of the summative test login screen. If they don't, contact your building test coordinator for more instruction. Students will enter their first name, their student ID, and the test session number to log in. Once students log in, your approvals button will become clickable and a number will indicate how many students have requested to join your session. Click Approvals to review your students and their accommodations before approving them. It is critical that you check to make sure that every single student is yours and has selected the correct test. This is your final opportunity to ensure the correct test is provided, and it is your responsibility to ensure that students take the correct assessment. If the student has selected an incorrect assessment, reject that test by clicking the red X and tell them to log back in and select the correct test. Click the I icon to review accommodations and supports for students who you expect to have them. If the accommodations and supports do not match what is expected, click the red X to reject that student's test and call your building test coordinator. Approve or deny students. Approving the wrong test or the wrong accommodations is serious. If a student starts working on the wrong test in error, their answers will be counted as valid responses and become a part of their score. Be aware that students requiring Spanish translated tests must have this accommodation in place prior to logging in. If the Spanish test is not in place before the student fully logs into the test, they will have to get their test reset by the state in order for that setting to appear in the test. Make sure it is in place before they log in. Best practices for testing. How to prepare your classroom for testing. Arrange desks to both encourage students to focus and to make sure your active monitoring is easy as possible. Seating students where they are easy to observe but do not have easy access to other students is the best plan. Seat students to encourage their best work. Before an assessment, take down or cover up anything that is in view that might assist students in answering questions, whether posted on the wall or elsewhere. Ask students to turn off and or put away cell phones, smartwatches, earbuds, or other electronics, books, and backpacks under the desk and out of reach while students are testing and during short breaks. For testing, headphones should be wired and plugged into the Chromebook. No wireless earbuds or headphones are allowed. Before testing, have students take anything out of their backpacks that they might need available during testing. For example, pens or pencils, a water bottle, or a snack. Put up your Do Not Disturb sign on the outside of your door. Make sure you know what materials you will need for each test and what materials are and are not allowed. Remember, if it isn't a universal tool, approved accommodation, tool, or support, the student cannot have it. Students should have the opportunity to experience the test interface before the summative test begins. There are 3 options to give your students practice working in the test interface. Training tests. These are the shortest practice test opportunity. There are less questions than the practice or the interim test. These items are non-secure test items. Students and families can interact with these questions and practice with the tools available. Practice tests. These are also non-secure test items. Students and families can interact with these items and practice with the tools. The CAT practice test is twice as long as the summative, but consider using the practice performance task math test as a teacher-led lesson to give your students experience and to help model the types of responses that the state would like to see on these. Interims are not intended to be used as practice or training. They are secure test items. Students cannot work on this test content outside of an interim test setting, nor can they work together on questions. Treat it as you would the summative. The interims are the same length as the summative assessment, and their intention is to be used to inform teachers of their students' progress and improve classroom instruction. A small amount of time and energy will result in big payoffs if you prepare students in the 3 ways below. 1. Give students a training or practice test to learn how to access the test, use their tools, supports, and accommodations, as well as to see and use the item types. Providing the training test using the TA practice interface and the secure browser will also let you experience giving students the test and the students experience logging into the test. It will also weed out any issues with your class roster, student accounts, your secure browser, and/or student device technical issues. During the training test, go over this vocabulary with students to make sure that they understand the system messages. This activity is very short but very helpful. Submit means that you can never go back to a test question. End test means you should review your previous answers now because you will not be allowed to go back to them again. Pause means coming back to finish the test later. A segment break message would be worded as, "You have reached the end of this segment. Please review your answers before you continue testing. You will not be able to come back to these questions later." This means that you should review these answers now because you cannot go back to them later. And commit. This means it is your final answer and cannot be changed and is used only in the WCAS test. And 3, walk your students through updating and restarting their Chromebooks to make sure that they will run well before testing. If you are doing the training test very close to the actual test date, you can do this activity with the training tests. Remind students about expectations to charge and bring their Chromebooks, cords, and wired headphones. Monitoring the classroom during testing requires your full attention. Actively monitor by walking around the room. You should look for students who are not working or have their head down. Look for students who do not have their corded headphones in both ears or plugged into their device. Students need to be able to hear the test in order to be successful. Look for prohibited items like cell phones or notes. Look for students talking, passing anything, or looking at other students' screens. Note passing can result in an invalidation. Keep an eye on scratch paper. If students ask questions, use the verbiage provided in your script to address the questions. Never leave students unattended with an open assessment. There must be a trained proctor in the room while the tests are open. In an emergency, prioritize student safety. Call your building test coordinator or front office for help if you need to step out of the room and have no available proctor backup. Use the TA interface to monitor student progress. There is some variance from student to student on the total number of questions in a given test. So do not worry if one student is done at question 45, but another is continuing on to question 47. Once a session starts, do not close the TA interface or let your computer go to sleep or restart. If this happens, try to log back in right away. If this does not work, follow the regular break procedures and start a new session. If your test session closes, your students will be kicked out of the secure browser after 30 minutes. The TA who starts a session owns that test session ID and is the TA of record. Do not let other people use your login or run a session you start and then leave, because that session is your official responsibility and your name will be on it as well as any incident that occurs. If you need to move a student to another room, we recommend moving students during a break, at which time you can end the test session and start a new one after the student has moved to the new test location. Best practices for breaks. Remember the 20-minute cap pause rule and the WCAS rule. Best practice is to treat all breaks as if they may last longer than 20 minutes. To avoid problems with the pause rule and get students in the habit of checking their work, it is best practice to treat all breaks like long breaks by providing students with 10 minutes to check their work time before any break. Write the check your work time on the board. At that time, instruct students to finish their current question and go back to check their work, focusing on those that they flagged. When you are ready to take your break, follow the end session instructions in your script and then start a new session when you return. Include check your work time when administering a training or practice test to get students used to the practice. Every time a student pauses their test, they must log back in using their test tickets. Remember to pass out and collect the test tickets for the login process. Wait to securely lock up the tickets until you are done with the session. Students always take longer to log into the test than we think they will. Do not underestimate this time and run afoul of the cap pause rule. Remember, the state will not reopen a test session for a student due to a pause rule error. Students may pause individually. You do not need to pause the whole class. Inform students that they may not access devices or discuss the test during breaks. Monitor students to a reasonable extent during breaks. When students have completed testing, make sure students submit their tests when they are done or pause them if they need to continue another day. Give students time to check their work before ending a session. Scoring takes place once tests are submitted. Any tests started but not submitted will be scored after the test window has closed when the vendor force submits them. A good practice is to click on the print session button to generate a PDF and have record of the final test status for students, but it is not required. Stop the session and log off. Secure your materials between test sessions. Managing secure materials is an important part of proctoring. Test tickets are secure because they contain FERPA protected student information. Keep them locked up when not in use. Distribute test tickets at the beginning of the session. Collect them from students once they are logged into the test and lock them up when the session is done. When no longer needed, tickets must be shredded. Scratch paper is secure because it contains test content. Make sure students put their name on their scratch paper and collect it and properly store for the next test session or shred as appropriate. For the PT or the WCAS test, collect the scratch paper and securely store it for the redistribution if the student does not complete the test during their first session. Return the scratch paper to the student until they have completed the test. Test tickets and scratch paper should be shredded or returned to the building test coordinator when a student has completed testing. Ask your building test coordinator for the best process for this. Report any mishandled tickets or scratch paper immediately so that this can be reported to the state. Test incidents and appeals. Test incidents. Test incidents are any situation you believe might affect the validity of a test result, such as but not limited to the following: cheating, cell phone or earbud access, proctor misconduct, test administrator error, computer problems, or unplanned interruptions. If you're aware of a test incident, contact your school test coordinator immediately for guidance. Test appeals. An appeal is a request to the state to reopen, reset, invalidate, or otherwise change a student's test setting status. An appeal must be requested as soon as possible to be resolved before the end of a test window. If it is granted, the normal pause rule will apply when the student logs back in. Most appeals require that the test be in a paused state. Completed tests are not eligible for some appeal requests. Types of appeals. Grace period extension. This request allows a student to access parts of a test after the pause timer expires. Tests must be in a paused status, and they're never granted due to a proctor error. A reopen appeal opens a previous test segment, for an expired paused test. Invalidate suppresses the scores and eliminates a test opportunity. Reset a test removes student responses and makes the test available again. Restore a test undoes the request to reset a test. Reassign a test is used to move a test when a student completes a test under the wrong ID and will reassign it to the correct student. Contact your billing test coordinator for any request for an appeal. Some invalidations are outside of our control, but some are easily preventable. Keep random people out of the testing room. Remove or cover aides and supports in your testing room. Give students the tools, supports, and accommodations that they are supposed to have, and none that they are not supposed to have. You can double check these in the approval process. Focus on monitoring students and don't do any other activities. Pay special attention to preventing student access to prohibited items such as phones and physical calculators. The state has informed us that they will not be granting appeals based on specific TA errors. These are easily preventable. Do not give the wrong test. Anything a student enters into a test will be considered a legitimate part of the test, even if it isn't the test you intended to give during that session. 2 ways to avoid this problem. First, don't open any extra tests. Only open the specific test you are giving. When you are approving students, check that they are accessing the correct test. If not, deny their access. Understand the pause rule. Remember CAT pause and use the break procedure. Don't get overconfident and think you can squeeze in a bathroom break in under 20 minutes. It's challenging. Use the break procedure, and if you get back in less than 20 minutes, terrific. And if not, there's no big deal. Watch your student progress in the TA interface. You'll be able to make sure your computer is doing okay, and you can track how students are doing. If you see a student speeding through, intervene right away. If they speed through and submit the test, the state rarely will reopen a test due to this circumstance. Make students understand that submit means they are done forever and they cannot go back to do any more work on their test. If a test incident occurs, call your building test coordinator for guidance. Reporting a test incident. If an incident occurs, pause the impacted student or students as needed. Contact your building test coordinator as soon as possible for guidance. If you are not sure if you should report something, go ahead and report it. Anything that potentially compromises a student's score is an incident. This could include announcements being read, alarms going off, outages or lockdowns, or cheating. Some incidents are considered test breaches and risk exposing secure test items. Common breaches include cell phone use, cameras, or untrained people in the testing room. Breaches require quick action. Call your building test coordinator immediately. Sometimes students will experience technical difficulties. If this happens, please remain calm. Ask your student to save and pause if possible. Have them restart and log back in, or swap out their Chromebook for a spare Chromebook if you have one. If the issue persists and it seems to be an internet or hardware issue, call the district tech helpline. Please have the test type, the SSID, the test session ID, and your Chromebook barcode ready. The following are useful resources for more information regarding state testing. TA scripts are required to be read verbatim, and each TA should have a copy of the appropriate script when proctoring a test. Have a copy of the troubleshooting guide handy in the event that an issue comes up. The California Universal Tools video is a handy 8.5-minute video that you can show to students that demonstrates the universal tools available to students when testing and how to use them. And OSPI's guides and standards manuals offer a lot more information on state testing. Your school site's information. Ask your building test coordinator about your building test plan for state testing. Is there a training test schedule? What is the plan for late arrivals? Is there makeup testing plan? Where and when will testing take place? Keep this information during your test sessions. Who to call. Have your building test coordinator name on hand and their extension. Who are you supposed to call in your building for an emergency break or support? The district assessment coordinator is Wendy Sinclair at extension 7303. The district tech help desk number is 7333. And in case of a vendor question, the Washington help desk number is listed on the screen. Thank you for viewing the SBA WCAS Test Administrator Training. So what's next? Please complete Side 1 of the Test Security Staff Assurance Report as required by the state. You can get a copy of this from your building test coordinator. When you complete Side 1, give your form back to your building test coordinator or designated contact. This form will be returned to you at the end of your testing window so that you can complete Side 2 as required by the state. If you have any questions, please contact your building test coordinator or contact assessment at extension 8378. Thank you.